Welcome aboard, shipmates. This is Real Sailors, Real Sea Stories, a training program created for the United States Naval Sea Cadet Corps by our supporters at the Naval Talent Acquisition Group in Philadelphia. I'm your host, Warrant Officer David Sheets, Commanding Officer of the John T. Dempster Jr. Division of the Naval Sea Cadet Corps. I am joined by our all-star, all-Navy support crew of MC1 Quinlan, who is our PAO, and STG1 Lewison, who is our technical support genius. We've had a change in program for today. Initially, we were going to discuss Master at Arms training, but like the title says, real sailors, and unfortunately, there were some other pressing businesses that our real sailor had to do, so we have an absolutely fantastic ringer coming in for your viewing pleasure this evening. So today's topic is the Navy officer experience and background in recruiting for the Navy Chaplain Corps. Our presenter is Lieutenant Commander Charles Banks. So cadets, this is not passive learning. This is active learning. So this is an interactive presentation. If you have any questions, and I hope you have plenty, please put them in the comments section below, and we'll read them off and present them to Lieutenant Commander Banks. In addition, there is an online quiz, which will be active for 2 days after this live broadcast. If you fill it out, complete it, send it in, you can get 2 hours of virtual drill credit. What a deal. So, enough of that. Lieutenant Commander Banks, the ship is all yours.
Hey there. Good. It's certainly an honor and a privilege to be with you today. When I reflect upon just the fantastic program that the Sea Cadets is, I wish I had been a part of it as I came up, and so it's definitely an honor to be here today. And we're going to train and talk a little bit about the United States Navy chaplaincy program. I do recruit for chaplains. It's a great job. It's exciting to be able to get out into the community and look for motivated spiritual leaders who would like to serve in the role of a chaplain, which is a unique role. We'll talk more about that in a moment. But before doing so, you can go ahead and go to the next slide. The Ministry of Presence is, so go ahead and stay on this slide. The Ministry of Presence is key because in essence, each of you have learned at least a little bit about the Navy, many of you a lot. And when it comes to the chaplain, we very much focus on physical fitness. We focus on making sure that our equipment is ready. We make sure that so many things are in place so we can accomplish our mission. What the chaplain does is ensures that the spiritual fitness is what it should be for all of our sailors, Marines, and other support people that are in our organization. So it's just a critical role. A little bit about myself. I'm originally from Rochester, New York, upstate New York, and I've been in the Navy for approximately 10 years, if you don't count the 1 year that I served as a reservist. So that's a little bit about me. I did a little bit of everything when it comes to the Navy. I started out as a surface warfare officer. I did that for 5 years. I'll show a couple pictures. I eventually transitioned into the public affairs officer community, which deals a lot with media and connecting with outside shareholders, people's support groups, and I'll talk a little bit about that soon. But I joined the Navy because I really wanted to build a strong foundation. And just another side note there, if I was in your shoes and I could hear this message loud and clear, you all are building an impeccable foundation by being a part of the Sea Cadet organization. This time of life is key because you're building up so much in terms of skills, proficiencies, and basically a resume to demonstrate that you have the potential to do whatever it takes, come what may. In the case of the Navy, to accomplish the mission, to uphold the Constitution. But I just, harkening back to the Sea Cadets, I didn't have that foundation. And so as a high school student, I knew that I really wanted to build a foundation in life on which I could, eventually build a family do something meaningful. Didn't have all the details, but I knew I wanted to build a strong foundation. So that's why I joined the Navy. The best thing, or the best best thing about my job is that I work with world-class people. Sounds a little folksy, maybe a little corny, but the truth is, that's in the 10 years that I've been in the Navy, I've met in my mind, they're superheroes. Of course, we all serve in the Navy. It takes a lot to get through boot camp and officer training and, come on in. It's a handful of people really can meet all of those requirements. And then you go into the fleet where, at one point you might be doing disaster relief over in the Pacific Southeast, or the Southeast Pacific, excuse me. You might be doing missions in the Middle East. You may be at a hospital, working at a hospital. During this pandemic, we see our sailors working to augment a lot of the medical efforts and treat people during this time of crisis. So the type of people and the caliber of people that I've met all across the country, from so many different backgrounds, socioeconomic, ethnic backgrounds, I've really made some lifelong friends, and it's just an honor to serve in that way. The top memory that I can think of, and I made for an input today for this presentation, is when I was stationed in Japan. One of our port calls was actually Singapore, and it was our job during our time in Singapore to connect with the Navy there and some other navies in the region and some public officials. And it was really neat because the backdrop for that engagement was that the Pacific, the Southeast Pacific region is just critical to so much that we depend on to keep our day-to-day safe. So paring it down, basically billions of dollars of traffic for shipping goes through the South China Sea. And so making sure that we have strong relationships with the Philippines, with Japan, with Singapore, with South Korea, with Australia, that was a huge mission. And so being a part of that for that time and engaging those and seeing those different perspectives was especially special. That's redundant. It was very, very special for me. So enjoyed that a lot. And that picture there, just for your information, that picture was actually taken at Lincoln University in Pennsylvania. And there I was actually connecting with the university president, sharing with her about the importance of the United States Navy and ensuring that the students there have not only an appreciation for it, but also could feasibly consider themselves becoming service members after they finish their term of education there. So a little bit about that picture. Go ahead, next slide. Okay, so yeah, about the Chaplain Corps. This is what we're here for, right? The Chaplain Corps. It's you can see what's there on the slide, but I'm going to give you the perspective of a sailor that's been in for 10 years. I'm not a chaplain, and I'm actually in school right now studying to become a chaplain because I believe in the program so much, and I believe in what they do so much. You as a chaplain, you have a myriad of responsibilities to include, ensuring that you faithfully represent whatever your religious background is, right? So all the clergy people, all the spiritual leaders who come in as chaplains in the Navy, they come in representing a particular background, right? Nobody comes from, a completely blank slate. So this chaplain, in some cases they represent, a Baptist Christian. Others may be a rabbi, in the Jewish community, and others there's imams, and there's a host of different spiritual leaders who come in. So they're one of their priorities is to make sure that they provide for the spiritual needs of those who are in their faith group, right? So now, moving aside, another core responsibility is ensuring that all of the service members in their command that their faith, that their spiritual needs are being met. Now, the key there is that a chaplain may not be the one that meets those spiritual needs for a sailor, especially if they don't have the same background. However, the chaplain, it serves to be somewhat of a liaison, a resource manager. He or she can connect that sailor with the sources and the contacts and the networks that that sailor needs to ensure that they are optimally and spiritually fit. And to tease that out a little bit more, one thing that makes us unique as a nation is that we have freedom of religion. And a chaplain is a key figure in protecting that freedom of religion, ensuring that our sailors can worship freely. And that directly leads to and connects with the fact that as sailors, we protect the right to worship freely. So it's pretty direct there. It's key that's what the chaplain does. And I'll give you a more practical example. Let's say we're pulling into Singapore. We're in Singapore, and we're going to be there for a couple of weeks. Before we get to Singapore, the chaplain has done a little bit in terms of homework and looked up all of the spiritual resources, all the points of contact, all of the institutions and programs that are offered in Singapore during that time. And before we pull in, the chaplain will get on either video or on the 1MC, make announcements and send email informing the whole crew about what's out there and what they can look forward to as they spend maybe their free time and when they're not doing the ship's mission. So that's a practical look. Again, in choosing Singapore is pretty key because, man, that is truly a country that has such a rich diversity of different religious heritages. And so there's a lot of different options, and that chaplain covers those options. And, so that's just an example of that. Another key element to being a chaplain is ensuring that he or she provides wise counsel to the commanding officer with regard to spiritual matters and whatnot. So if there is a complex ethical decision that a commander faces, as he or she does every day, if there is spiritual implications for our movements and the ways and the mission that we're doing in a certain region, a chaplain may very well inform the commanding officer, if he or she does not already know, that hey, the weekend in the Middle East where we're going is actually Friday and Saturday, not Saturday and Sunday. Things like that, keeping that straight, but providing that wise counsel to the commander, is also one of the key jobs. I ducked away from, and I didn't develop out the idea enough of the ministry of presence. Just as important as it is to provide clear representation for a chaplain's faith tradition, as important as it is to ensure that all of the service members, civilians, Coast Guardsmen, Marines have their spiritual needs met, as important as it is to make sure that the commanding officer is well informed about the situation and the spiritual side of things. The ministry of presence is really the idea of the chaplain just being there. It sounds crazy. It doesn't sound exceedingly complicated, but I'll tell you what, when a chaplain, being a sailor having been a sailor for 10 years, when a chaplain is there, when you as an individual are experiencing some of the most difficult times in your life, maybe the most challenging times in your life. Maybe you're a 17-year-old that just got parental consent to come into the Navy. You're all the way clear across the other side of the world. You're in Japan. You're feeling a little homesick, and you find out that a close relative just passed away. That chaplain being present, caring, attending to what's going on and providing options and resources and wisdom from life, that's what that chaplain does. And then to be able to pivot that same day from going to providing care to that individual who is grieving, obviously, that chaplain can turn the corner and step into the commanding officer's the office of the CEO and say, what's going on, and the CEO can download an exceedingly complicated ethical scenario, and that chaplain is there ready to switch gears. Going from that meeting, the chaplain, because he or she is present, can go down and celebrate a birthday of one of the sailors, who is like I said, is away from home, and would love to be with his or her family, and is not, but is there on duty on the ship during his or her birthday, and that chaplain can celebrate that. And as you see, those are sweeping changes in emotion, sweeping changes in detail and energy, and that chaplain is specially suited to be able to provide attention and presence during those times, and that's a very important thing. So there's a lot there that a chaplain does, and you can definitely go to the next slide.
Commander Banks, while we're switching slides, there actually have been a couple pretty interesting questions coming in from the cadets, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. I would love to, actually, yeah.
Okay. So one of them has to do with, as a chaplain, are you called upon to assist sailors with mental health challenges?
Perfect. I think that's a wonderful question. And I think it's a wonderful question because here in 2020, and this is one thing I'm very excited about, in fact, 2020, there's a special regard and respect for the complexities of mental health difficulties. So the chaplain is actually one option in a you can say a plethora of, or you can say rather a team of options to address a sailor who is having mental health difficulties. We in the Navy have social workers, we have counselors, we have individuals who are skilled and trained for psychological help. And so a chaplain may be suited to address the needs and concerns of someone dealing with mental health challenges, but that chaplain may not be. And one of the things that a chaplain does is they have the resources. They're able to refer, make one phone call, assist that member to get the help that he or she needs, whether or not he or she can provide it. And that's key to being a chaplain. So a chaplain, I have seen many cases where the chaplain can absolutely help and aid service members and develop resiliency and address some things that may be harming their mental health. But like I said, at the end of the day, they may not have it, and they need to get that sailor to someone who does, and that's really the key. So look at that chaplain as kind of a liaison, a resource manager, someone who can help. Yep. Next question. Uh-oh.
That dovetails into a question which is similar in many respects, and that has to do with our current situation with COVID-19.
Absolutely.
Right? And the adapting and having our sailors, because there's fear associated with this, right? There's unknown with this, right? It's great to have an enemy that you can see, right? Deal with it. So, any insight in relationship to chaplain's work and supporting that, since it's definitely a hot topic in the fleet right now?
Absolutely. So and great question. Certainly. With this is quite honestly for many, myself included, this is an enemy that we have never, the likes of which we've never seen, and it's not a respecter of person, not a respecter of background. We've seen it ravage communities and travel in very quick speed. My sister actually is a nurse in Texas. She went up to New York to help serve and augment the nurses up there because they just didn't have enough nurses. And that's the nature of this thing. So your question is very well received. And what I'd say on that is that a chaplain is, I think, one of many who is there to help maintain. But quite honestly, the truth of the matter is this is difficult for everyone. The unique perspective that a chaplain offers is to remind service members of the spiritual side of things. If the spiritual side of things is something, if your spiritual fitness is something that you can draw upon, develop, hold on to, and cultivate, a chaplain is there to emphasize that, to bolster that time. The truth is, for me, just speaking from my standpoint, if it wasn't for my spiritual, my spiritual dynamics, the fact that I'm a church guy, I was raised in the church, and I'm a praying man. I'm a Christian. So a chaplain would be in a place, where he or she can help me and remind me of those things that I believe. Maybe some books that I could read, maybe some resources in the community that we're serving in that can help support during this time. Not to mention the fact that very practically, one of the key roles that a chaplain does when we're out to sea and when we're other places is what are called comrel. Comrel is a term used, a short term used for community relations. So basically, it's engaging with the community. In many cases, it's feeding the hungry, visiting the sick, and that type of dynamic. A chaplain would be responsible. He or she orchestrates those projects, and so that's what a chaplain does. But bringing back to the question, one of the things that a chaplain does, bring it back to the question, during this time of COVID, again, the ministry of presence. We, instead of taking it from a general, bringing it into a specific, a chaplain will be there as you are trying to find out what's going on with your family if you're on deployment if you're on deployment in Japan and your family is in New Jersey or even closer, maybe Newark, maybe New York City. What's going on? What's the status? A chaplain can help you in that regard. A chaplain can pray with you. A chaplain can encourage you. One thing that is a key watchword in the Navy culture is resilience. The ability to, in the face of adversity, persevere, continue, keep going, accomplish the mission, hang in there. And the chaplain is a key element of the team to keep you resilient. Because at the end of the day, we're warriors. We have to be resilient. Our nation counts on it. And so that's a little bit about that. But in terms of the COVID piece, absolutely. The chaplain brings to bear all of that individual experience, training, teaching. One thing about the chaplain is that a chaplain cannot become a chaplain until he or she has a master's degree in theological training, spiritual training, from an accredited university or institution. That individual has to have 2 years of pastoral or spiritual leadership experience. That individual has to come well recommended and endorsed by his or her faith tradition. And they have to go through a series of interviews and many gates, basically, to ensure that chaplain is qualified to be of support to you as a sailor or, to our service members. And so during COVID, not during COVID, whatever the time, whatever the season, the chaplain is there to help you persevere.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Were those
we have other questions coming in, but I think they may dovetail a little bit more into some other items that you probably are going to be covering. So I'll try to continue to weave those in. Yeah. But for the cadets, again, you're asking some really great questions here, and we will do our best to answer them. So, sir, continue on.
Absolutely. Okay. If what we're going to try here, we're going to try to show a video, and if this works, golden. If we'll see. But yeah, let's go for it. I think the sound might be an issue.
But the pictures are really great. So tell your own story as this is happening.
I love it. It's great. Actually, that I wish we could pause it's some of the people in this video I actually know. That the chaplain there that was on the aircraft carrier in the white uniform there. She's actually a drilling reservist here in the New Jersey area. She's a part of the AME church, and we've had great conversations. What these pictures though definitely show is one thing you got to understand: the military context, the Navy context, even better, is such a different world compared to what civilians, what you even as Sea Cadets see on a day-to-day basis. I know if I remember correctly, you all go to trainings and you're able to kind of see what it's like to be in the fleet. And just want to emphasize that really for especially someone just coming into the military, it's a foreign environment for many. And so the adjustment necessary to come into the Navy, the chaplain helps with that. And then not only is it in a foreign environment, but the challenges that a individual faces on a day-to-day basis. A chaplain is uniquely skilled to help navigate those challenges because it's not every day that you as Sea Cadet, me as a private citizen before coming into the Navy, it's not every day that I face life and death situations. It's not every day that I had to lead. When I was 22 years old, I came in right out of college leading, in some cases, 30 to 40 sailors. And those are people who reported. That's a lot for anyone to handle. It's the first time for, like I said, the 17-year-old that goes to a foreign country and is up for most of the waking hours doing harder work than they ever believed or experienced. So in essence, it can be a very challenging time in one's life, especially early on. In the chaplain, man, you're seeing that's the person who cares about the human. That's the person that cares about the soul, right? Not to say that the other elements of the military organization do not care about you. In fact, the chaplain relies on every aspect of the organization: the commanding officer, the chiefs, the leading petty officers, your fellow sailors, basically all the way up and down the ranks. He or she relies on every element of it to push through, because at the end of the day, Army, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard, we're all people. We're all human. That doesn't change. And the key is to get you back home to your family intact, motivated. And there she is. I know her personally. She's a great person. But that's the chaplain helps you remain intact, keep your goals ahead of you, keep your humanity, because those pressurized situations, they're unlike a greater percentage of our country ever faces, ever. You see there the Marines out there in the middle of the field. Such a unique time, bringing it back to faith, reminding that individual of who he is, who she is, is very important to maintain, as that previous question, to maintain that mental health. There's an example of a comrail. Being able, no, that probably wasn't a comrail. That was probably a care package that chaplain was able to deliver to that service member. A care package being, mail from loved ones. It has candy, gifts, goods. Those help your morale. And if I haven't said that before, I think that's important too, to note that a chaplain is key to helping maintain the morale of the sailors and Marines and just those people out there in extremis. So that's very key. That's very key.
So another really very insightful question that came through. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's exactly what you were touching upon, is the fact that, there are so many different people in our nation and so many different ways of thinking. And that's really where our strength is. Right.
Yeah.
And they're not always necessarily in sync. Right. Clearly, serving in the military, we have regulations and things that we follow. But what about the person's feelings? How do they react? How do they, view the world? So one of the questions was, how do you best support other people's faiths when their tenets of their faith may go against, say, Christianity? Are you constrained in what you can share with the gospel?
Yes. The short answer is yes. Okay. And here's this is a key term that's critical to understanding the military chaplaincy is the idea of proselytizing. Proselytizing is a term that is important because in essence, it means to try to convert, try to change, try to, in essence, bring somebody else's spiritual beliefs into conformity with your spiritual beliefs. And in this case, it's that of a chaplain. And we are, or the chaplain community, one day, if I can become a chaplain, a chaplain is prohibited from trying to force a sailor, a service member, a Marine, what have you, to modify their tenets of faith to conform to that chaplain. Basically, a chaplain can't make somebody another spiritual, have other spiritual leanings. With that being said, using the example of the Christian who was a chaplain, right? That the military service members, the law protects that chaplain to, again, faithfully represent where he or she is coming from. But what that doesn't do, as in every other case of the military, as I explained here in a moment, what that doesn't do is cause that, what an A doesn't do is take away the responsibility of that chaplain to work and care for all of the sailors and everybody represented, whether it's somebody from a different faith tradition or whether it's somebody that doesn't have a faith tradition. That chaplain is obligated to work on the behalf of all the sailors. And the truth is, here's another point. As a sailor, again, you may be coming in at age 18. After a couple years in service and seeing the world, you may take on and be open to other faith traditions. And that chaplain is there as a resource if you want it to help navigate that, to learn more. Because again, the one of the elements or the keys behind a chaplain receiving and earning their master's degree is that they have to have a basic working knowledge of what else is out there in terms of perspectives. And so respect is very central to what a chaplain must do in engaging the sailors in all the different elements of the organization. And there have been some chaplains who have crossed the line and have disrespected others in the faith that they have, and they have been removed. They have been addressed by the service. There have been many chaplains that I know who do a great job at respecting what's there. And the nature of it is, hey, you step into the office of a chaplain, the ideal situation is that the chaplain will A, listen to the reason why you're there, B, gauge through discussion what exactly do you need. Is all you need a listening ear? Sometimes, many times, a chaplain does best to the sailor just by listening. By the end of the discussion, that sailor has been able to work through some things, bounce some ideas off of the chaplain, and at the end of the day, very little in terms of original thought or suggestion is necessary. So listening is key to determining exactly what the sailor. And then number two, at some point the chaplain will determine does this individual desire the resources that I can pull and offer from my faith tradition. And in many cases, it is the case. There's been many times that I've read books from the chaplain on my command that he suggested. We prayed together, and that was very edifying for me. But there are other cases where that chaplain, the individual that's coming in, is not interested at all of what's going on or of what that chaplain can offer from his or her faith tradition, but that sailor is interested in the critical thinking, the fact that chaplain is well read, the fact that chaplain has been in the Navy in some cases longer than the individual in some cases. Just a different perspective. Maybe that chaplain just showed him or herself to be a trustworthy individual that sailor can confide in. So at the end of the day, the chaplain, I'm sorry to be long-winded on this point, but the choosing a chaplain and me being a recruiter, finding chaplains, it's critically important to find somebody who is not only qualified, but respectful and seeks the well-being, the comprehensive well-being of sailors. And sometimes what that means is, hey, we won't talk about Baptist Christianity, but we can talk about what are some wise ideas to apply to thinking about buying a home or getting married. And a lot of times that develops trust. And sometimes, there is a conversation about faith later on, but it's not forced and it's not coerced. That's the big deal there. I think I said a lot there, but please share any other questions.
Oh, certainly. Actually, this is very interesting. I can tell from the cadets, and definitely from my perspective too, because you're getting a really good insight in the service that the Chaplain Corps provides. Within the Sea Cadet Corps, we focus on a whole lot of military orientation things, right? But
Yeah,
Chaplain Corps is not one that we generally touch on for no particular reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this is really good training for everyone on board right now to get that sense of how, there are dedicated people on board to help. And that's key. And Lieutenant Commander Banks is well versed in talking about this. To the point is quite a few of the comments coming across is, how do I actually become a Navy chaplain?
Oh, perfect.
Right?
Yeah.
Like the schoolings and things like that. Like, how would someone go there? So it sounds to me like you're getting a lot of interest in this through this discussion, which is great.
Absolutely, this is great, and I'm glad to hear that interest. Because the truth is, the Chaplain Corps needs men and women of character at the end of the day that can do that role. And from what I've seen, and what I'm particularly impressed about, is that you see cadets, you guys put a lot of concerted focus and commitment, or rather attention, to developing your character. I have met chaplains that don't have great character. They met wickets, they have good resumes, but their character isn't that great. And that's to the detriment of our Navy. Far more common is that the chaplains have great character. And it's with regard to the requirements for coming in as a chaplain, I want you to brace yourself, because it's pretty extensive. And this is something that I firsthand learned, okay? So a chaplain, number one, has to possess a bachelor's degree. A bachelor's degree, I believe the count is 120 credit hours, but not having the sheet right in front of me, I could be wrong. But in essence, they have a terminal bachelor's degree. They've graduated with a 4-year degree in some discipline. It doesn't have to be spiritual per se. For example, my background is in political science. You could be an engineer. You just have to have that bachelor's degree. So,
where did you go to school, and how did you get there?
Oh, perfect. I didn't talk much about that. So, brief diatribe. I went to Florida A&M University. Florida A&M University is down in Tallahassee, Florida. And I went there because at that point in my life, I think I was clear that I wanted to join the military. But another thing was, I really wasn't interested in accruing a lot of debt for school. So putting those together, I didn't have any grandparents who were in the military. I didn't have a great, as developed of a sense of our nation as I currently do. There's a lot that I didn't have, but I did know that I wanted a family. And if I wanted a family, I knew that I needed a job that would support the family one day. And I knew that the type of jobs that could support a family like I wanted to would probably require college. So I knew I wanted to go to college. And I knew that one option to get to college, especially avoiding debt that is oftentimes accrued through college, is through serving in the military. And so I looked up Navy ROTC programs after my dad actually told me that there was a difference between enlisted and officer. I didn't even know that. My thought was, I think I'm just going to go to a recruiting station in town and sign up and earn, and do that. And that path is actually an exceptional path. I learned now on this end in retrospect. But I looked at ROTC programs. There was an ROTC program back it up a little bit. I applied for the, Navy Reserve Officer Training Corps program, the national program. I had all of my ducks in a row, a resume, great grades. I was like the president of the National Honor Society, yada, yada, yada. I interviewed with the officer that's required to interview you for your Naval ROTC scholarship. The officer gave me a thumbs up. He's like, hey, I really think that you're going to go far. You should be a shoo-in. A day later became 2 days later. 2 days later became 2 weeks. Soon we were in the springtime, and I didn't know. And this is my senior year. I'd already been accepted by schools, and I didn't get any results. And finally, I did. The guidance counselor called me in and said, "Hey, you didn't get the Navy ROTC scholarship." No kidding. The next day, there was a chief in Chicago, Great Lakes, who called me and said, "Hey, even though you didn't get the Navy ROTC scholarship, there's something called the Historically Black College and University, HBCU scholarship, which is the one down at Florida A&M University and other schools. But Florida A&M University is a school that historically existed when people of African-American descent could not go to school in other colleges and universities. So that institution up to modern day has been preserved. It still is historically, that's why they call it historically African-American school, Black College and University. And it has a Navy ROTC program there. And not only did I get the scholarship to get a full ride there, but I also got room and board, which wasn't offered in the original application. So I went to Florida A&M University down in Tallahassee and majored in political science. And that's how I achieved my bachelor's degree. I was in ROTC, which is essentially you're in school, you're pursuing the classes for your major, but you're also taking some coursework with regard to naval science, leadership and development, and you're part of what in our case it was called a battalion, where you work out together, you learn basic military ideas. A lot of the things that you're learning in Sea Cadets probably are similar to what we learned in ROTC. But
it is, and a lot of our cadets go down that path, and the transition to be much easier, not simple, right? Yeah. But the transition's easier because of this training.
Oh yeah, I eagerly support that path, because as a freshman in ROTC, we would host drill teams, JROTC units, other those high school events on our campus. And when I tell you that many of those high schoolers were actually more squared away than I was at the time, that was the case. So whatever you're able to do to prepare for that time is great. And because a lot of what I learned there in school was absolutely new to me, but it trained me after my freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, senior year. I was prepared to do what it took to be an officer. And honestly, more than anything else, that experience taught me humility, because going into the fleet, you go in as an officer, but you don't know a lot. You don't have the experience, but you're held responsible to be able to lead. And so humility is very key to that. There's so much to be said about that, but I did ROTC, got commissioned, and I think I have some photos of that later on in the presentation. But that's how I got my bachelor's degree. The bachelor's degree is the first element that has to be there in the application for a chaplain. Then in the education category, that applicant also has to have a master's degree on top of the bachelor's degree in divinity. Divinity is a misnomer, in theology. Many different faith traditions call it different things, but they basically have to have a theological master's degree that is 72 credit hours. So every detail in that is important because there are master's degree programs that are theological in orientation that are not quite 72 hours. There are master's degrees, obviously, that are not theological in orientation. So meeting those requirements are very important to having a complete application for being a chaplain. It sounds daunting, but I'll tell you my story here in a minute. Brief story with regards to this. So you have to have your bachelor's degree. You have to have your your master's degree. You also have to have 2 years of ministry experience, meaning not only just ministry experience, but you have to have full-time ministry experience. Doesn't have to be paid, but you have to serve in a civilian pastoral or spiritual leadership role of some form, and that has to be at least 30 hours per week for at least 2 years. That's a major hurdle. That's not easy to do. But again, I'll tell you more about that in a minute. The reason for that is they want to make sure that you can faithfully represent and lead and have experience doing so. In essence, we don't want to bring a clergy or a spiritual leader into the Navy that's a rookie. We need that individual to provide, because they could find a scenario where a sailor is depressed, they are at wit's end, and they might want to harm themselves. We need somebody that is coming into the Navy being able to. I don't even think it's respectful enough to say handle that situation, but be of good value to that sailor in that case. Specialized. The chaplain is considered a staff officer, much like a lawyer or a doctor or a dentist. They bring special skills into the Navy, which they're using to help us accomplish our mission. And so they have to have those 2 years of ministry experience. They have to have the master's degree. And lastly, they have to have an endorsement. They have to be endorsed by what we call in the federal government a religious organization. It's very much like and pretty much synonymous with denomination. Some denomination has to endorse that individual, because we're in essence, as an organization, trusting the religious organization that this is someone that we can trust. So the process even to become a religious organization that the federal government recognizes is a complicated one. But there's approximately 200 different religious organizations represented to include, different elements of, the Islamic faith tradition, the Jewish faith tradition, the Christian faith tradition. And that's just the surface, right? There's 200 different religious organizations that individual can be endorsed by. But in essence, in summary, you have to have the experience, you have to have the education, and you have to have the endorsement. Now, when I graduated, remember I told you I went to Florida A&M University. I graduated. I didn't have a master's degree, nor did I have the money to pay for it. I didn't have the experience in ministry to be able to apply. I didn't have any of those things. But what I did was I found out the requirement to be a chaplain, and I never let go of that dream. And this is what I'm saying to you. So those who are interested, you may not, all the pieces may not be there right now, but you have to be someone that is able to play the long game. I'll tell you that the United States Navy, at least for me and many others, they can get you to where you want to go. And when you get there, you'll be more than prepared. So for me, I spent 5 years as a surface warfare officer. My first 2 years as a surface warfare officer, I didn't think that what I was doing could value anything. It was very difficult. It was the most difficult time of my life. It was challenging. People expected things of me that I didn't have. I was on the spot so many times. I was tired because I didn't get a lot of sleep. It was a lot. I didn't have the richness of the experience of the Sea Cadets. So the only things that I learned was when I was in college, among so many other things. Basically, you get thrown in. No one, very few people, I will say, starts out in the Navy experts. If somebody says that they are, I would tell you that person is probably mistaken, and is on the verge of being humbled. My point in saying that is I came in, those first 2 years were crazy, and I didn't know if I was going to make it. I didn't know if I was going to be able to keep on going. But, I was able to meet some chaplains and some people that said, keep praying, keep hope, keep persevering, keep going. My second tour was on an aircraft carrier, and I'll show that later. My first was on the USS Kirk. Then I was on an aircraft carrier, the USS Ronald Reagan. And that second tour, I was a standout sailor. I knew how to work hard. I was humble. And, the commanding officer there supported me. And what I ended up doing, because I was a great officer by his observation, but I wasn't a stellar surface warfare officer, I put in a package to do what's called laterally transfer, which means you go from one type of job to another one in the officer corps. And I became a public affairs officer. I had a background in politics. From school, I did well enough, as a surface warfare officer. And so the Navy said, you know what? We'll go ahead and give you a shot as a public affairs officer. And they sent me to training, and I did that. Now, keep in mind, I knew when I was in ROTC that I wanted to be a chaplain. I was licensed in college to be a minister, a preacher of in my faith tradition, the gospel. But the road to get there, specifically the chaplaincy, I had not traveled down that road yet. And lo and behold, later I find that as a person, I had not grown and developed enough yet. For year 4, I go into my next job. I work at a MEPS, which is where you get all of your administrative work. It's pretty administrative. It's the process to get into the Navy. Did that for a year, learned some management skills. Then I went in to 7th Fleet as a public affairs officer, which is, like I said, based where I was forward deployed out there in Japan and got to see, oh my gosh, so many different countries, so many different perspectives. And I got a real insight into why the Navy is so important in a lot of different ways. But getting out there, being able to see that, learn the how to communicate as a public affairs officer, how to write, how to advise senior leaders. I advised a 3-star admiral. I told a 3-star admiral, sir, you may not want to say that. You might want to emphasize this. Perhaps you want to come across in this way. It was invaluable to my development as a communicator. And I think, if you think about it, communication is very important to being a chaplain. So during that time, my initial time in the Navy, not only did I gain a lot in terms of experience and how I could actually serve sailors, because I am a sailor and I've had that experience. I also, at year 7, the year 7 mark, it was key because some of you are familiar with the post 9/11 GI Bill. Because I did ROTC, the way it works is, because I did ROTC, I owed 4 years to the Navy to be an officer and work really hard. After that 4 years, the clock starts over, and I was able to earn some more education. And that's important because after 3 years, 36 months of more service, honorable service, I was able to get my master's degree. And currently I'm in my master's degree right now, achieving that academic aspect of the application to become a chaplain. And then all that I'll have left, I have my endorsement already. I have to knock out my education piece. And once that's finished, I'm going to be working on getting that civilian pastoral experience. Right now, as a recruiter, I'm connected to a local church. When that time comes and it's time for me to get the experience, I'm going to be a reservist and work at a church. We will have our family will have saved enough and have enough in terms of finances that I'll be able to do that without being that much of a financial. I know this is very detailed, but be a great burden to the ministry that I'm a part of. And once those 2 years are complete, I will be ready to come into the Navy as a chaplain. So what my message to you is that if you put your mind on it, all you need to do is figure out now, reverse engineer from where you want to go and what you are doing now, and you can fill out what's in between and do the combination of meeting great mentors and meeting great peers that you select to help encourage you along your path and your mission, your journey can be great. And my journey has been great up to this point. And one day, Lord willing, I'll see you in the fleet and I'll be your chaplain.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yep. Definitely. It's right now. It's what I see on the screen. Oh yeah, there you go. Great. So I kind of summarized a little bit there. So I'm a recruiter. This slide is more dedicated to the chaplaincy. We spoke at length about that, but as a recruiter, I help spiritual leaders specifically in our region who feel a call to service as a chaplain do what's necessary to make their dream a reality. So what that means for me, I've been in for recruiting this job for the longest I've been anywhere else, for 3 years. And during that time, I've met individuals that didn't quite have the experience, or maybe they didn't quite have the education. Funny story, I had somebody that has a doctorate in ministry, a master's degree in divinity, but because he was granted a admission to his seminary where you get the master's degree on an exemption, he didn't have a bachelor's degree. And no kidding, even with a doctorate, he wasn't able to come into the chaplaincy. And in essence, we drew up a plan, we set a goal, and this fall, he should be able to come in as a chaplain. So that's what I do. I get into the details, I find individuals, and really just develop a plan to meet all the requirements. And during that time, build a relationship and give them insight as to what the Navy is really about, because I have that experience. Also, as a public affairs officer, the way I put it there is I help the Navy tell its story so that the American citizens can support, allies and partners are assured, and enemies are deterred. So the 3 points there, we're illegitimate as a force unless we are supported by our nation. That's the key. Constitutionally, we are stood up to protect the Constitution, defend the Constitution, and to defend our nation. That's why we're legitimate. So the public affairs officer is important because we tell the story about what we're doing so that the American public can know and they can support. Allies and partners all around the world, a lot of what we do, in our videos, in our articles, in our broadcasts, it's also to signal and to let out all of our partners out there that we are still strong and we're still committed to our commitment with them, whatever the case may be, whether we're talking about Europe, in Asia, in Africa, wherever our partners are, and that we're a credible force, that we're not only committed in word, but we're committed in our assets, our training, our manning, and we're ready to go, come what may. And then the enemies are deterred because they see what if they want to challenge us, they see what they're getting themselves into. And honestly, that is a key deterrent. So that's what I do as a public affairs officer. Yep. Next slide. Okay, so some crazy pictures of me. That was when I was in ROTC. Our battalion was the Rattler Battalion. The top left is me during PT. As you can imagine, I have a lot of energy. That's one thing I have a surplus of, and that's just an expression of it. We're in our old PT uniform. So this is before the gold, and I know, Warrant, those probably look familiar to you. That's what our PT uniforms look like. You can see the guy on the right, and then some really, really high shorts. That's what we used to wear. And then over to the right.
They were pretty spectacular. I'll give you that.
The classic. Yes. You have on the right there, we're in our dress blues. Those are some of my classmates, many of which I still keep in contact with, and some are out of the Navy, some are still in. One there in the front, there on the left, her last name is I want to say Smith. Haven't talked to her in a long while, but she went into the Marine Corps. So the way that the Navy ROTC works is that you have the Marines and the Navy, coming through the same program. There's slight differences, in the process, but we go through it together. There's just me in my little tie and civilian clothes outside of my unit. The one on the bottom left, in the middle that's during what's called midshipman training, because during the summertime, as a ROTC student, you actually get a chance to, for your first summer, you get to experience the surface Navy, the subsurface Navy, so submarine, the aviation Navy, so, pilots and whatnot. And then you get to spend a week with the Marine. And so that was my first summer there. We were on, I believe that was when I was on the Arleigh Burke, actually, destroyer. And we might have been, we're in some type of formation there. We're coming into some type of formation, perhaps a refueling. I'm not sure. I can't really see very clearly. That next slide, or that next photo, obviously, that's me getting commissioned. I'm there in Tallahassee. So a lot of memories there, during that time. Next slide. Yep, and then these next slides, just a quick selection of my first top left is there when I was on the USS Kurt, which is a frigate. We've retired our frigates. It's a small vessel, but it's pretty much committed to subsurface warfare. There's a lot of patrols. We have special equipment there to provide assistance and protection in a lot of our straits. Fifth Fleet, the Straits of Hormuz, Straits of Malacca. There's that over there. That was a great tour. Again, I don't look like it there, but I was absolutely stressed out. Another note there too, I was wearing glasses. The Navy also paid for my PRK surgery. As you see in this call, I don't have glasses, so it's pretty much like LASIK, and got it done. And another benefit to being in the Navy. The next picture there is my wife and I and our children. At the time, I think there's only 3 there. My daughter was just born, and they're in Japan. But we have 5 now. Later you see in that last picture. The picture next to us in Japan is when I was promoted to 04. The bottom left is recruiting. I was giving a recruiting acknowledgement to one of our leading sailors in our recruiting command. And of course, there's that picture of me with my family, which is important for me to communicate, because though it's difficult, I will not say that it's not difficult, because that would be untruthful, but it's definitely possible. And, it's very possible to have not only a family, but a healthy family while you're serving. Again, you have to be nimble. You have to do a lot of sacrifices, and a lot of creative thinking when you're in the service. But the upside is that there are a lot of people in the same boat with you who can offer support, insight, experience. And my wife, truly, I wouldn't be able to have the career that I have had in the Navy personally without the support, care, leadership at times of my lovely wife. She's amazing. So that's our family unit there. And also, I want to highlight, of course, over there on the left, I was on the Kurt, which is a frigate, USS Ronald Reagan, which is an aircraft carrier, huge ship, aircraft, at times 5,000 members, a little city in the sea. You have the Maps Fort Dix, like I said, pretty administrative. 7th Fleet Command. 7th Fleet is again over there in Asia. Pacific Chinpo, Chief of Information Office, is in DC, and that's where I spent my 1 year as a reservist supporting their news desk there, and that was a very eye-opening experience. And TAG Philadelphia is where I am now, where I get to do a plethora of things, mostly focused on getting those chaplains in, lawyers in, and having the honor of talking to you. So I've been to over 15 countries, and that's a great thing too. Well, that was a big element too. Going to 15 countries, if you can imagine, seeing Singapore, seeing Hong Kong, Shanghai, and Zhanjiang, going to Australia, going to Korea, going to Spain and Djibouti, Egypt, going over to we had one port of call in Mexico, with one of to do a engagement there. There's just so much that I've seen as a result of being in the Navy that, that's perspective that you just can't you just can't download, right? So it's just a great, a life altering experience in that regard. So next slide. All right, so that's a little bit about me, a little bit about my background, a little bit about Navy chaplaincy. Love to hear any more in terms of questions.
Sure. I mean, the very kind of interesting thing that about your presentation and the questions that are coming in is, cadets, I don't want you to be discouraged by you asking questions and that by not being read out specifically. But Lieutenant Commander Banks was actually answering many of your questions while his presentation was going on. So that's great that everybody was in sync with this. So there were questions, and you did get to it in regards to how do you become a member of the Chaplain Corps and what are those responsibilities with that. So we got into that. One question though, which I think has everything to do with ethics and everything to do with the nature of what the Chaplain Corps is about, and in certain respects, what the Chaplain Corps is not about, is that are the Chaplain Corps involved in any way, shape, or form with psychological warfare?
Perfect. Very good. That's a great question. So one important thing to cover is that by federal law that supersedes the Department of Defense, chaplains are what are called non-combatant. They can't, by virtue of being a chaplain, they cannot be a combatant. Psychological warfare participates in combat operations. Now, the information, the general unclassified information about the spiritual makeup and the religious dynamics in a territory, in a region, that's a chaplain can provide that. What someone who's part of the PSYOP community can do is they can take that information and do further research. However, the law precludes a chaplain from participating in combat operations. And even though psychological operations doesn't seem like it's combat per se, it is. It definitely is combat. So I mean, that's pretty much straightforward. At the ethics, that is a very key ethical piece. And if you take a bird's eye view, we have chaplains with their protections for a reason. Another thing that's part of it too, that's germane, it relates, is that there's a chaplain does not want the chaplain to share that with anybody. The chaplain is bound not to share that information. So I say that, and that's an interesting dynamic. It's a key. It's a high trust there, because to improperly use the office of the chaplaincy, it would undermine, number one, who we are as a nation and what our mission is and how we do what we do. And it would be an ethics violation for a chaplain to be involved in that type of work, even though it's very much a part of our greater mission, right? So we all have to play our roles, and that's key.
So another similar question, kind of going down this route, which is great, because I think it's fantastic that our cadets are trying to really understand the bounds and the ethical context of this and the support being done. So, I mean, these are really great, insightful, mature questions from all of you who are watching. So well done. So in one of the videos, the video we were showing, that we were able to narrate, they're showing chaplains deployed with Marine Corps units.
Yeah.
Okay? So one of the issues, now we're talking about non-combatants, right? So when you have, and you're with an active Marine Corps unit, right? And then they're out fulfilling whatever mission that they're doing, right? Sadly, maybe there's a situation where someone is fatally injured in some way, shape, or form. Okay.
Yeah.
And it has to do with performing a very respectful, say, last rites type of of ceremony for that person's spiritual needs. But you're not, that person's faith may be different than the faith that you necessarily represent directly as a chaplain. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
How is that handled?
Absolutely. So again, what's important is these, and that's a chaplain. Okay, so let's take it back to the selection process. After this chaplain has demonstrated that he or she has the education, the endorsement, and the experience to serve in this arena, because it's different than a parish, it's different than a church. It's an institution that serves a plurality of backgrounds and beliefs, right? And so after that chaplain has shown the qualifications, then he or she, of course, is boarded down in DC to ask these very same questions. What would you do in this scenario? What would you do in that scenario? And based on his or her answers, he or she has to demonstrate that he or she is prepared to respect the wishes and the dynamics surrounding that individual, number one. Number two, he or she also goes through extensive training after being selected. So not only do they go to what's called ODS, Officer Development School, which is, how to become an officer, but they also do two phases of chaplain-specific training so that the Navy can now demonstrate and teach that individual who is coming from the real world, okay, you do business this way out there, but this is how business has to be done in the Navy, and here's some things to keep in mind. Not in any way causing that chaplain to compromise their faith tradition, but making it clear that this is what a chaplain has to do. And in that circumstance, if that individual does not necessarily have the same background that the chaplain does and whatnot, there are ways that chaplain will be trained not only by their faith tradition and background. I'll give you an example of that. For myself, as a minister in the Christian tradition, I have training from my elders from my local church on doing a funeral. If I'm asked to, which is another key, if I'm asked to doing a funeral for someone that isn't necessarily of our faith tradition, and to do that respectfully and to do that in good taste and respecting that individual, their family, and whatnot. I had that training from the civilian side. Furthermore, in the chaplain school side, on the Navy side, they'll get further training. But the key there is in all cases, you have to respect people where they are and only be a support and asset. I'll tell you what, I don't know personally how much of value I will personally get from a chaplain if I'm serving with him or her, if I notice and I realize that individual is taking advantage of their position of power and influence and really not respecting the faith, background, and wishes of the various sailors. So I know it's a long-winded answer, but we are, to be a staff corps officer, to be a chaplain, it's a very, very key trust that this nation is giving you. And the ramifications and the consequences for transgressing that trust, they're pretty severe, and that's important to understand,
So that I think does a really good job in framing this entire presentation that you gave us. Is that me, for one, I found this to be very informative, and clearly from the responses we're getting from the cadets as well, because as I said, this is not an area that we necessarily touch on in our training. So This is incredibly insightful to me. Clear from the audience is very insightful. And, again, the questions that are being asked are right on point. So there is, a significant appreciation now, and gaining one, of what the Chaplain Corps provides to our service members. And at the same time, a significant appreciation what you as an individual, Lieutenant Commander Banks, are providing to our Navy. So, lots of thumbs up, lots of thank you for your service, which, we all appreciate, but, extremely well received and much appreciated. And I can't thank you enough. So
Warren, it's an absolute honor to be on this call. I very much respect all that you are doing. Keep keep your head in the game, keep working hard and building that foundation. And one day, Lord willing, for some of you, I look forward to serving with you in the fleet. Definitely.
And if that's the case, cadets, right? And who knows, it could be Admiral Banks at that point in time. Make sure you said, I saw you live on a webinar for the Sea Cadets, and I'm sure everybody will remember it. So again, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Cadets, again, there is an online quiz after this. Almost every item that was discussed here, strangely enough, is in that quiz. If not, check Google. You know how to do that. Fill that out and get that completed. It's only going to be active for 2 days. Again, thank you very much, Lieutenant Commander Banks. Our backstage crew did a fantastic job. Improvise and overcome. Appreciate that.
Oh, yeah.
Look forward to having another episode next Tuesday. So please stay part of the program. Appreciate it. Talk to you soon. Take care, everybody.